My son blamed me for ruining his marriage, then threatened to bury me or kick me out. That night I finally broke my silence and everything changed. I did not speak. I sat there, my hands folded neatly on my lap, my heart pounding a rhythm I thought I had forgotten how to hear. My name is Elizabeth, 80 years of memory folded into the lines of my face, but today I felt like that same woman who once held her husband's hand on this very porch, when the world felt smaller, kinder. The dining room felt worse now. The table was narrow, the chairs creaked under weight heavier than any person. My son Tom stood across from me, his face flush with anger, eyes glinting with something I recognized too late: contempt. He slammed his fork onto his plate, the metal ringing against the wood like a warning bell. "Don't stick your nose in our business." "It's none of your business," he screamed, and I swallowed down the urge to defend myself. The room grew colder. I watched as he swept a glass of iced tea across the table, sending droplets splashing across the linen placemat. "Your presence ruins everything. You smell like rot. You sound like guilt. Maybe we should just dig you a hole and be done with it." He paused, leaned forward, voice low and cruel. "And if you interfere with me punishing that stupid woman again, I'll show you what regret looks like." My daughter-in-law, Lisa, sat beside him. Her face was swollen, bruised, a quilt of purple and yellow that told a story louder than any cry. She stared at the floor, tears pooling under her lashes, her hands clenched in her lap, as though she could squeeze away the shame he heaped on her. I recognized the look. Fear that felt like a trap, gratitude tangled with dread. Tom's threats landed on me like stones, but the heaviest one was this: he had broken my husband's final earthly promise. The promise that this family would stand by each other. Now that promise lay in splinters of bone and grief, and the blade that had shattered it was his voice, twisted into something I struggled to recognize as my son's. I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, but a steel I thought vanished long ago. At 79, I am not young. But I remember. I remember the first day they moved in with me, the looks on their faces, convinced they would graciously accommodate the old lady. I remember celebrating birthdays, pitching in when money was tight, smoothing the tension between them with cups of tea and quiet hands on troubled shoulders. I remember the ways Tom looked at me, proud son leaning on his mother, until the day he didn't need to. And then I remember the moment that changed it all, when Lisa had bruises and I had begged him, just once, not to hurt her. That moment was the turning point. From that second on, I was not mother anymore. I was obstacle. I sensed the gathering storm, but I never thought he would turn the lightning on me. He did. He had been drunk the last time he hit her. He had apologized, said it would never happen again. She had thanked me for talking to him, for not leaving the silence to swallow her alive. From that moment, he began to unravel. The threats came first, whispered in passing. Then the slaps, when I would try to help carry dishes. He pushed me once, hard enough that the back of my head hit the corner of the wall. But no one saw, or if they did, they chose silence over testimony. I chose silence too, believing it would keep me safe. Or maybe I convinced myself that was safety. And then dinner tonight. The air thick with rancid accusations, every word a chain wrapped around my chest. But here I sat, breathing calmly, because for the first time in 7 years I realized something. Silence was the thing I regretted most. Not for me, but for all she had suffered. My eyes focused on Tom's shaking hand, the way the rest of his body quivered with the weight of what he threw at me. I set my jaw and pressed record on my phone lying hidden beneath my napkin. He would regret this one day, but regret would not help her. It would not undo the fear or the broken bones. I have spent my life reading between the lines, understanding people by the silence they keep and the words they cannot say aloud. I understood Tom in this moment. His anger was fear wearing a villain's mask. But I also understood myself. I had nothing left to lose. My husband died loving me, believing I deserved the world. I intend to honor that, this night, this moment. As he finished speaking, panting and exhausted by his own venom, I stood. My body protested, but my spirit did not. I walked around the table, each step echoing years of waiting. I knelt before Lisa and placed my hand gently on her arm. "I will not let him hurt you," I said softly, but firmly enough for Tom to hear. His face paled. Lisa looked at me, fear shifting to something else. I saw hope rise through her tears. She looked at her husband and whispered, "Mom, thank you." Tom's fist clenched. I met his eyes head on. "I will not interfere," I said quietly, "but I will not hide anymore either." And then I walked out of that room before he could react, before the rage returned. Behind me, I heard a crash, but I kept going, my heart steady, my mind resolute. I had finally broken my silence. I remember the day we signed the papers. It was nearly 12 years ago. And I still recall the sharp scent of pine that crept through the windows of the little bank office on Maple Drive. Tom held my hand, his eyes bright with dreams of the future. The house was modest, but it was ours, and we laughed as we promised each other that it would be the center of family dinners, birthday parties, bedtime stories, and holiday traditions. At 70, I sold the last of the pigs in my backyard herd, the ones I had raised myself after Ruth passed away, and tucked the money from their sale into my savings account. When Tom said he needed help with the down payment, I never hesitated. I handed over every last dollar without question, feeling more pride than fear. This was what a mother did. When the painted front door first welcomed us home, I brought over a quilt my grandmother had sewn. It was a patchwork of faded flannel and love, each square stitched with careful hands. We hung it over the back of the sofa, as if draping a promise across the family room. Tom hugged his new wife, Melissa, and I felt a swirl of hope and relief that warmed me better than the stove on a cold night. I pictured them here forever, their laughter echoing through those walls. But life has a way of unraveling even the best-laid plans. It started slowly, a missed paycheck, a heavy sigh at the kitchen table. One afternoon, Tom came home with a stack of bills, his face blotched with shame. He said he'd lost his job, that the company was downsizing, that he was looking for something else. I slipped my hand into his, but he pulled away. The next evening, he buried a letter under his pillow instead of placing it beside his bed. The months that followed were dark. Late nights on the porch, with Tom and Melissa whispering about money. The fridge emptied faster than I could fill it. They stopped bringing me in on conversations. They closed their doors and shut me out. I watched as Tom's pride cracked, but I never let it break completely. I sold a few more pigs. I sold my old china set, the one my mother had given me at my wedding. Late one night, I came into the kitchen to find Tom poring over stacks of overdue notices. He looked up, and his eyes softened just enough to say, "Mom, But he could not bring himself to finish. I slid the money across the table and said nothing. He paid the bills the next morning. Over the years, I'd covered repairs for leaky roofs and broken water heaters. I paid off credit card debts and renegotiated medical bills. Each time I told him it wasn't necessary, but he shook his head and said, "You saved us, Mom." So I did it, because saving them felt like saving my own heart. I never asked for a receipt. I never asked for repayment. I asked only that they build memories here. But gratitude, as I would learn, is not inherited. It must be grown and tended, or it withers. As Tom's financial pressures mounted, his tone hardened. I heard harsh words spoken in the garage, in the kitchen, late at night when I could not sleep. Melissa would come down the stairs with fresh bruises, and I would pretend I saw nothing. At first I wondered if it was stress, but then I saw the pattern, a twisted rhythm of apology, of broken, bruised skin, of whispered promises he would never do it again, and then again, always again. I remember sitting on that same porch that first evening, contemplating whether motherhood meant protecting your child or knowing when to turn your back for the sake of self. I stayed silent because I believed in family above truth. I stayed silent because I thought love was sacrifice. I stayed silent because I was afraid of what I might lose. One night, Tom exploded. He slammed his fist against the kitchen counter and screamed, "You've ruined everything!" He said I'd destroyed the balance in their marriage, sabotaged their ability to stand on their own feet. I told him that if anyone ruined his marriage, it was him. He glared at me as if I'd just dug my own grave. I'll never forget the moment he said it. "If you can't stay out of our lives, you and your money can leave. Just stop meddling." In that silence, I realized I had earned nothing for him. He saw me as a burden. My kindness, my resources, my sacrifice, they all looked like chains around his ankles. Mercy becomes contempt when it is force-fed instead of offered. That night, I tucked away the bank statements, the pig sale records, everything. I carried them with me wherever I went as proof, not of what I lost, but of what I gave. And I began to understand that I had enough, not money, but evidence of my own worth. Here in this house I helped keep standing, I planted my patience and my pride. I planted roots so deep that a gale of resentment would not uproot me. Now, years later, I sit here at the dining table, 16 stone slabs of memory carved into its surface, waiting for the moment I reclaim those roots. I am no longer just the woman who saved a marriage. I am the woman who learned when saving becomes harm. I am the woman who will no longer stay silent, no matter how quiet the world may want her. Because mother or not, I chose dignity over convenience, and no one can buy that back. I watched him throw his weight around the kitchen, chest heaving like a storm ready to burst. My heart beat heavy in my chest, but I did not move. I had seen this woman before me, our daughter-in-law, Lisa, trembling beneath the weight of his anger. Tonight, I had finally stepped in. "Tom, that's enough," I had said earlier. My voice carried the weight of years, of bedtime stories, of birthday cake icing smeared on palms, of secret midnight coffees to soothe restless moms and dads. He spun toward me as if I was a ghost in the room. He said, "You always take her side like she did not destroy our marriage first." His voice cracked with rage and fear, or maybe something older, something colder. He advanced, the distance across the kitchen shrinking with every heavy step. Lisa shrank too, her shoulders folding inward, arms clamped to her sides. The bruise beneath her eye stood out under flickering overhead light, like a map of betrayal. Her lips were parted, but no sound came. The silence in that moment was a presence, thick as blood, as guilt. Tom stopped in front of me. He towered. His face was pale, eyes glassy, throat swelling with words he fought to keep inside. "If you keep interfering," he spat slowly, "I'll punish you too. You'll know what it means to regret." He leaned in until our breath mingled. He smelled of whiskey and shame and fear that had long ago calcified into his bones. My knees trembled. My heart thudded so hard I feared it would burst through my ribs. But my hands did not shake. My voice did not betray me. Because I had brought something tonight he did not know I had brought. A pair of glasses wired to record, the camera nestled low in the frame, hidden in plain sight. I had fueled it with memory and law and proof. I had prepared for this moment because I knew it would come. He said it again, in a low growl. "You'll regret this." He reached out, fingers twitching, poised to strike, but he hesitated. Not because he was kind, but because I did not shrink. I met his glare evenly, like a window pane that refused to break. I had seen that moment before, years ago, when he was 8, and I disciplined him gently, saying, "Anger has weight, Tom. Let's carry it together, not bury ourselves in it." Back then he listened. Now he no longer recognized me. As he wavered, I spoke, not loudly, but steadily. "This ends tonight." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lower myself. I simply asserted my presence, my worth. I said, "This is my home too." He froze, his jaw clenched. He backed away, stepping into the glare of the overhead bulb, and in that light I saw the shape of a man collapsing beneath his own rage. Behind me, Lisa shifted. She crept closer. I placed a hand on her shoulder, not to comfort her, but to tell her we were in this together. We did not need words. We only needed presence. I whispered into her ear, "You matter too." She nodded, tears shimmering in her lashes. Tonight was not about me. It was about both of us. Tom stared. He lunged once but recoiled. He snarled, spit between clenched teeth. He grabbed a wooden spoon off the counter and smashed it against the granite. The splinters flew. I'll never forget that sound. It was a declaration of brokenness. He stood among shards and wood and rage. I stood too, tall even though my knees shook. I used that moment to recite the pledge I had practiced in front of my mirror earlier. "I will not be your victim in silence." I said it out loud now, clearly. "I will not be harmed. Not again." Tom laughed, a short bark of dark humor. He twirled the spoon in his fist. He looked down at it as though it was proof of his sovereignty, but I saw the tremor in his knuckles, the sweat beating at his hairline, the panic in his eyes. Lisa stepped forward for the first time in months. "He's right," she said in a soft voice, more powerful than anything I had spoken tonight. "You don't get to treat her like this." Then she said my name. "Mom." Her voice cracked. We both turned to him. He looked at us as though betrayed. Silence hung in the air. A storm paused before its next blow. It was then I saw the truth. This is not a fight of bodies, but of stories. His story of betrayal, of inadequacy, of money spent and hopes stolen. My story of mothers and daughters and choosing love over fear. Lisa's story of survival, of standing when the world told her to collapse. His weapon then was regret and violence. Ours was memory and solidarity. He let the spoon clatter to the floor. It broke again under its own weight, like his anger had. He looked at the shattered wood and said nothing. The tension shattered as well. I stepped forward, collecting the broken pieces. I gathered them in my hands, not as proof of his violence, but as evidence that things break so they can be fixed. I turned them inward, so Lisa and I could quietly piece them together later with tape or thread or time. I said softly to both of them, "We can heal, but only if it stops tonight." Then I walked away, guiding Lisa by the arm to the front door. Behind us, I heard Tom's uneven breath. I looked once at his silhouette against the hallway light. I did not falter. I did not fear. Because in that moment I realized that punishment failed when compassion returned. That regret is not a weapon, it is a lesson. That love, even when battered, can still be a choice. I chose it. And tonight I chose it for us all. 7 years of fear does not etch itself all at once. It settles like dust in the corners, invisible until the light shifts just right, and you realize how thick it has become. I told myself the walls were closing in on me slowly, but some days they slammed shut overnight. It began when Tom lost another job. His temper had always been unpredictable, but then it turned fully against me. I became the target of his frustrations. The too-old mother whose questions felt like accusations, whose concerns felt like complaints, whose very presence felt like permission to poke and provoke. His most effective weapon was control. He installed deadbolts on every door I might use, including the door to my own bedroom. I could not nap in peace. I could not retreat to that room where I kept our wedding photos tucked in the nightstand. I was shut out of my own past, locked out of the memories I needed like oxygen. At first, he said it was for my safety. "I don't want you wandering around alone," he'd claim. "Doctors say you might fall." But the locks were not about safety. They were about power. I realized it when he refused to give me the keys back, saying, "You're confusing yourself again, Mom." And he would smirk as he watched the promise of my day slip through locked barriers. Then he started wiping my contacts from my phone. Friends I had laughed with for 50 years, younger, widowed neighbors who brought me fresh pie, old library colleagues who knew exactly how I liked my morning tea. Gone. My phone became a silence in my pocket. When I discovered the missing names, I felt panic. I tapped on a name that wasn't there and shook with loneliness. He said, "You don't need old gossipers calling you. You need me." There were nights I stared at the blank space on my screen and wept quietly. It was not pride or stubbornness that kept me from asking him to restore those numbers. I believed, even in that cage, some of those names were a reminder of who I had been, who I still could become. So I swallowed my pride, I swallowed my tears, because I believed fear meant hiding, and hiding meant still breathing. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me give up. Every time I picked up the hospital phone book, thinking I should ask for my prescription refill or maybe a checkup, his voice cut through my resolve. "Stop calling people. Stop sending texts. You'll regret making me show you what regret looks like." I heard those words in my sleep. I saw them in my dreams. I felt them in the hollow space beneath his clenched fist tonight. I took to sleeping in the living room on a recliner that held more history than comfort. I kept the camera turned on. I kept a notepad in my nightstand drawer. And I decided I would remember every moment, every sentence, every act that could walk me back into the light. If our home was a prison, then he had the keys and the map. But he did not have my mind. He had not crushed my will. He did not know that the mind can hold its freedom even when the body is locked inside walls. At night, I would hear the sound of Lisa's footsteps, shuffling down the hallway as though she practiced an apology with her body before her voice could try. I would hear her soft crying, the small, desperate sound of someone pressed against the darkness until their voice becomes a whisper. I would whisper back, "You are safe. You are seen. You are enough." I did not see any extinguishing of light when I said it. The tears would soften. Her shoulders would relax, just a little. That was my purpose. My purpose reclaimed, to comfort, to witness, to remember that fear but not silence was the path that kept us alive. I had spent my life telling stories. I had guided young students through the past, teaching them context and compassion. I had taught them truth lived inside courage. Now I was living the truth myself, that courage may be quiet, but it is never small, that courage may slip and tremble, but it breathes until it learns how to stand. Sometimes fear whispers that we should stay hidden, be smaller than our shadows, do not rock the boat. But what is hidden can also wither, and what is silent may never grow. So I wrote letters back to those disappeared names. "I am okay," I typed out. "Tell Jim I miss his peach cobbler. Tell Marcy I will call when I can." Then I stuffed the papers in my pocket, just a whisper of history, a reminder that I had once known them, and they had known me. 7 years went by like that. 7 years of locked doors and vanished names, and threats like daggers that never fell. 7 years, I thought, perhaps the walls were winning, that fear had claimed me inside. But one night, in the darkness when everything felt most still, I understood something deeper, that I wasn't the captor of my own fate. I still had my mind, I still had my voice, I still had my pulse. And as long as those things beat inside, I had the right to call for justice. I realized that night I could choose how this story ended, not in surrender, nor tragedy, but in quiet triumph. The loudest battles often happen behind closed doors. They are not fought with banners. They are fought with resolve, with evidence, with voices saved until they matter. I had proof. I had a story, and I would no longer worship silence as if it were safety. Silence had become my cage. Breaking it would not just free me, it might free us all. So I folded the letters into my coat pocket, pressed record on my little camera glasses, and I waited for him to come home tomorrow, because tomorrow I would break those walls. Brick by story by story, with evidence, with justice, with the quiet strength of 79 years of living and remembering. I was seated by the window, the afternoon light filtering over my knitting needles, each loop a quiet attempt at calm. The yarn slipped through my fingers, smooth and steady, but my mind was anything but. It had been weeks since I'd heard Tom's voice, tense and laced with accusation, weeks of silent meals, locked doors, and the heavy weight of his threats hanging in the air. I tried to focus on the stitches, but the knot in my chest refused to loosen. Then the ring came, sharp and sudden, snapping the fragile quiet in half. I glanced at the cell phone on the coffee table. It was Tom calling from his work number. I hesitated, but the screen showed his name. I lifted the phone with trembling hands. He barked into the line. "You're interfering with my business. Answer me, woman. I'll be home in 10 minutes. My heart jolted. "Interfering?" I whispered, voice fragile. "I haven't. Don't act stupid," he snarled. "If you don't stop meddling, everything I've built dies. I'll be home in 10. The line cut off. Silence swallowed the room, and I realized my knitting had dropped to the floor. I rose slowly, legs weak. Knowing what was coming, I moved toward Lisa in the kitchen. I lifted the phone and held it out to her. "Call 911, I whispered, breath shaking, "and call Jasa. I need help." Tears welled in her eyes. She glanced at the door as if expecting Tom's return at any second, then nodded. With trembling fingers, she tapped the screen. A second later, she said, "They're coming. They said they'll send someone." She handed me the phone back. I cradled it like it was a lifeline. "Okay," I breathed. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to curl into the chair and pretend nothing was wrong, but I remembered the bruises on Lisa's arm, the locked doors, the missing phone numbers, the shrinking of my world. I realized the danger wasn't only about fear anymore. It was about survival. I sat back in the recliner, folding my hands over my chest as the seconds ticked by. The sun dipped lower, casting shadows that stretched like silent watchers. I knew it would be only minutes before Tom returned. Then I called my daughter, my eldest, far away and only a call away. My voice quivered as I said her name. "Yes, Mom?" I can't stay silent anymore," I managed. "I've been afraid, but I need help." I heard her intake of breath. Then, "I'm on my way. I've contacted the neighbors. Mom, you did the right thing." Tears slipped down my cheeks. I placed my hand over my heart, feeling it beat with quiet urgency. Soon, a knock at the front door rattled through the walls. Lisa jumped, her body tense. We exchanged a glance, and both moved toward the door. I opened it to find a uniformed officer on the porch. "Ma'am, your daughter called, and so did Jassa," he said softly. "Are you safe right now?" I nodded, stepping aside so he could enter. He followed me to the living room, eyes scanning the room. I gestured to the upright recliner. "I'm fine," I said, voice calm but resolute. "But I've been afraid." He gave me a patient look. "You did right calling. We'll stay here until your son arrives, and Jassa will send someone to check on you later." I closed the door behind him and leaned back, a rush of relief swamping my nerves. Jassa staff arrived moments later, offering support and words of reassurance. They explained that I could apply for an elder abuse protection plan, file for a restraining order, whatever I wished. When they left, the phone rang again. It was my daughter. "Mom, are you safe?" "I am now," I replied, voice firm. That night, I didn't knit. I lay awake in my old bedroom, my sanctuary once stolen by sneered whispers and locked doors. I let tears fall, but they carried something different now. Not just fear, but the weight of my own courage. I realized something crucial. Breaking the silence didn't mean I had failed at mothering or grandmothering. It meant I was telling a deeper truth, that I did matter. Not because of blood or birthright, but because I deserved love that didn't demand silence, and safety that didn't accept loyalty to abusers. That night, I fell asleep thinking about what tomorrow would bring. Perhaps confrontation, legal forms, visits from lawyers and social workers. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had allies. I had proof. I had a name beyond Mom or Grandma. I had a voice, and I would not shut it again. When dawn came, sunlight streamed through the curtains. I rose slowly, feeling steadier than I had in years. I dressed carefully, with purpose. Grabbing the phone, I scrolled through to find the numbers I'd saved, the JSA contact, my daughter's number, the police precinct. Each name reminded me of connection, not isolation. I sat at the kitchen table, set 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for Lisa. She joined me, eyes red but resolute. "Mom, thank you." She didn't need to say more. I wrapped an arm around her shoulder, the steam rising between us. "For both of us," I whispered. That afternoon, we filed the first of our protection paperwork. I signed forms I never thought I would need. I asked questions. I listened. And I remembered my worth. Not because I had survived, but because I had spoken. And that day, the next chapter began. No longer hidden, no longer silenced, no longer afraid. Because calling for help was not the end. It was the beginning of my story reclaimed. I opened the door to Jassa's representative, a gentle woman with kind eyes and a folder filled with exactly what I needed, a temporary order of protection. My hands clenched the legal papers like a lifeline. I read the words carefully. No contact, no stalking, no intimidation, and most importantly, no going near my bedroom or entering my private space. It was a shield. It was hard-won. It was mine. Moments later, Tom burst through the front door, shoulders coiled like a spring, voice raw with fury. "What is this?" he snarled, staring at me with wild eyes. He glanced at the officer standing in the hallway, a witness now embedded in our home, and something in his face faltered. "This is crashing your fantasy," I answered, quietly. "This is not up for debate." Lisa stepped forward. She spoke with a quiet confidence I had not heard in years. "Can't contact me or Mom, not by phone, text, email, or in person." Tom's jaw clenched. "This is crazy. She's ruining us." The officer took a step forward. "Sir, if you attempt to violate this order, you will be arrested. You may not enter this room or make any contact whatsoever until the court modifies this." Tom's eyes burned with resentment, but he could only stare. I saw the moment our dynamic cracked. Our power shifted. He was used to fear and submission. Now he had neither. He ran his hand through his hair, looked at Lisa, and said nothing. For once, there was no slur of invective on his tongue. The JASA advocate offered us resources, housing alternatives if I needed, helplines, legal support. It was a new kind of safety net, a mesh of community and legality woven around my life. That night, it felt surreal. I ate dinner in my bedroom, the new sanctuary, behind closed and legally guarded doors. Lisa brought me chicken soup. We spoke quietly about tomorrow's plans, my appointment with the elder rights attorney, her call to HR explaining what had happened, a meeting scheduled with the local domestic violence counselor. We didn't talk about Tom. We didn't need to. The walls that once protected him from accountability now protected me from harm. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the past 7 years, the locked doors, the erased names, the whispered rage. I thought about the little notebook I'd kept, dated entries of pain and neglect, of regret, threats, and bruised silences. Now I lay in a room I had legitimized as mine, not stolen, not borrowed, but unequivocally protected by law. The next morning, I woke early. I saw the sunlight break across the wooden floorboards, dust dancing in its wake. I breathed deeply. Lisa joined me for breakfast, pancakes with fresh berries, the first meal in months that tasted like something more than just sustenance. When I looked at her, I realized that night had changed us both. We had been survivors in parallel roles, she the battered daughter-in-law, me the silenced mother. That bond between us had crystallized, not of blood alone, but of courage and witnessing and survival. I called my daughter to share the news. She cried on the phone, relief pouring through the line. We talked about tomorrow's court date for the full restraining order, about installing extra locks and cameras, about rebuilding my network of friends in the neighborhood, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had a future again. Because the order of protection did more than lock doors. It unlocked something inside me, a sense of agency, of legality and personal agency woven into the fabric of my last decades of life. Tonight, as I close my notebook, I write one line at the top of the page, in bold letters: I am free. Not because I left, not because I pretended to be someone else, but because I chose to be myself, and that choice now has legal protection, and that, I think, is the greatest triumph of all. I moved in with my daughter and granddaughter soon after the order of protection was granted. The air felt lighter, and suddenly my days were filled with soft chatter, little feet padding across wooden floors, and the warmth of a home that felt truly my own again. My granddaughter, Emma, ran circles around the living room, her laughter bright as sun. My daughter, Anne, held my hand and guided me gently through each morning, reminding me that strength comes in shared moments. I felt fear begin to peel away, replaced by something I had long forgotten: hope. Each week, I walked into the JASA Senior Support Group. Their name meant little until I realized how many other women carried stories just like mine. There was Mrs. Patel, who had endured heartbreaking loneliness after her husband passed away, and Ms. Rivera, who had nearly been scammed out of her life savings. We sat around in a circle in pastel chairs, drinking coffee, exchanging small victories, a stronger lock, a phone call to a distant child, the courage to venture out again. At first, I was quiet, still getting used to speaking without fear clogging my voice. But each week, that changed. I began to tell parts of my story, how I'd felt invisible, how locked doors and erased names almost stole my identity, how stepping into the police car that night had felt like lifting a weight off my chest. Faces in the group softened. Tears glistened at the corners of proud eyes. When I finished speaking, I felt lighter, like something inside me had been released. After several months, JASA asked me to speak at their annual Elder Abuse Awareness event. They called me the grandma who found her voice. My heart pounded when I stepped to the podium, floral dress, silver hair pinned back, voice shaking just a little. But I looked at the crowd, advocates, elders, friends from the support group, and I found courage in their faces. I began my speech softly. I never thought I would be the kind of grandmother who speaks up. I thought getting older meant retreating into the shadows, and I told them how silence had taken 7 years of my life. But I also told them how breaking that silence brought me home, doubly so, because for the first time, I felt I belonged to a community that did not fear my age, but honored it. I shared that feeling of dread when Tom smashed into my world, but I also shared the relief when I found allies. I held up my little camera glasses as evidence of preparedness, and the audience gasped in recognition of everyday tools becoming shields. Then I announced what I had started, a volunteer-led community group called Voices of Experience, organized by elders for elders, so that no one would ever have to feel alone again. After the speech, people came forward, women in shawls, men with folded hands, thanking me for speaking. A detective approached, saying he'd learned something new that night. We are never too old to rewrite our role in the world. I met a lawyer who said he would help any elder in need. Another attendee excitedly offered to host a monthly meetup in her own town. That evening I returned to Anne's kitchen for dinner. Emma jumped into my lap and demanded I tell another old story. I looked at my daughter when she handed me the plate, just home-cooked vegetables and rice, but seasoned with love. I realized the moral of that day wasn't about escaping darkness, it was about planting seeds of light. In the weeks that followed, I led Voices of Experience meetings in our church basement, every Wednesday morning. Word spread. We had 10 attendees by the end of our third week, women in wheelchairs, veterans, retired teachers, some still carrying bruises unseen. We shared numbers for grief counselors, medical advocates, and elder law attorneys. We invited local police to speak. We sat in circles and practiced saying, "I deserve safety," until we believed it. One afternoon, I sat with Mrs. Patel and Miss Rivera on a bench outside the church and looked at the spring blossoms. Mrs. Patel said, "Your story gave me courage to go to the bank and check my account. I had hidden a wire transfer from my grandson. It was fraud." Ms. Rivera nodded, tears in her eyes. "I canceled the land deed I almost signed. I didn't know that wasn't my real estate agent." We held hands then, 3 older women woven together by shared strength, and I realized why my voice had mattered, because theirs did too. Not every day was easy. Some members slipped away. Some responded to threats I felt in their voices. But many stayed, and each time a new person walked through the door with fear on her face, I saw why this mattered. Because fear might whisper that we should be quiet, but courage reminds us that our stories are powerful tools, that telling them helps more people survive until they too remember they are not invisible. By the end of the year, we held a community event, Safe Spaces for Seniors. We invited journalists, police, nonprofits. We shared panels, testimonies, legal advice. I introduced the keynote speaker, a woman whose story mirrored mine, who rediscovered her voice at 92. The room was packed, with elders, with volunteers, and with young people who came to learn. I watched across the hall as families listened and nodded, and I heard a reporter call me the spark behind a movement. That night when I got home, I found a letter at my front door. It was from Lisa. She and Tom had separated. She wrote how my intervention had saved her life. She wrote that she and her daughter were staying with her sister now, but they wanted me to know I could visit any time. I wept with joy. My world had expanded, built not just on memories of the past, but on the promise of a future where elders matter. I had gone from fear to advocacy, from silence to solidity. I had become proof that age is not a sentence, it can be the foundation of something extraordinary. I sit now in my granddaughter's room, watching her draw. She forms a picture of 3 women standing together, roots tangled and strong. I stop my knitting and tell her, "That is us. We stand together." She looks up and smiles, then returns to her picture, confident in colors. "My name is Elizabeth. I'm 79. I am safe. I am beloved, and most of all, I am heard. Because I chose to speak, and in doing so, I found not just my voice, but a community that needed to find theirs." I returned to the old house on a bright spring morning, the scent of rose petals drifting on the breeze, the sunlight warm and forgiving. The garden looked just as I remembered, rows of pink and crimson plumes, their petals softly opening to welcome me back. This was the place Tom once threatened to bury me, the place he had stolen with his threats and locks. And yet here I was, standing in my own backyard, stepping softly as though walking through a dream. Tom is gone now, not by choice but by court order. He entered a mandatory anger management and therapy program, living away from home with strict supervision, his visits scheduled and monitored. The order of protection remains in place. I do not miss his presence. I miss only what I once hoped he might become. Lisa, however, thrives. She left him quietly, declaring herself free with a small smile and a suitcase of hope. She visits when she can, bringing fresh flowers, sometimes lavender, sometimes daisies, that she places in a clear vase on my kitchen table. Her presence is warm and reassuring, a reminder of what real relationships can feel like. And me? I have returned, physically and spiritually, to this house, my home. The door to my bedroom is unlocked. The hallways echo with nothing but my own footsteps and the hum of life returning. I sleep in the same bed where Tom once locked me out, where I would lie awake listening to footsteps and whispers. Now I sleep with the window open, the lavender breeze drifting in at night. I made sure my camera glasses still work, tucked near the dresser, but I have removed their memory cards. Proof is kept with my lawyer, unused now. I do not care to record any more. What matters now is not evidence, but life. I have planted new rose bushes along the fence that borders the driveway. Each morning I check their buds. Each afternoon I sit beside them with a cup of mint tea, the little steam spiraling up like a victory banner. Emmy, my granddaughter, comes to visit on weekends. She brings a worn copy of a poem she found in one of my journals. She reads it softly. She was buried, but she bloomed. Her voice quivers when she reaches that line, and I see a lump rise in her throat. I told her once that adversity would push her roots deeper underground, but that a true bloom rises despite the earth above it. Today, I feel like that poem. My roots are stronger. My bloom is brighter. Lisa joined us on the porch that afternoon, bringing iced lemonade. We sat quietly, watching bees dance among the petals. "It's peaceful here," she said. "It's like nothing ever went wrong." I squeezed her hand and smiled. Everything went wrong, but we fixed it. She nodded, and I felt proud that she understood. Life is not erased just because a darkness falls. It is made beautiful through healing. My daughter visited too. She had flown in the day the court decision was announced. She brought news that my support group, Voices of Experience, continues to grow. Our Wednesday meetings now rotate among 3 local churches. I was invited to speak again at a county event this summer. "They remember you," she said. "They call you a hero." I laughed. "I'm not a hero," I told her, "just a mother who finally chose herself." She kissed my cheek and said, "That's enough to inspire 100 hearts." The house is quiet now that evening as I prepare for bed. I walk along the hallway that once felt like a gauntlet of fear. My footsteps are slow but steady. I pause at my bedroom door and smile before entering. Inside, the quilt my grandmother made hangs on the chair by the window, a tribute to the strength passed down through generations. I smooth its folds, remembering the day I first brought it inside a decade ago, filled with hope. Now, hours later, I rest beneath it with gratitude. I lie down and close my eyes, surrounded by the scent of night-blooming jasmine, climbing on the trellis outside the window. I feel the hum of life all around me, the crickets, the distant traffic, the soft murmur of neighbors winding down. I think of everything I endured, the locked doors, the erased contacts, the threats meant to terrify me into silence. And then I think of what followed: a court order, liberation, community, rebirth. They tried to bury me, but I buried their lies instead, I whisper into the darkness before sleep claims me. Tomorrow I will rise again, walk among my roses, sip mint tea, and greet the world that finally knows my name as one who survived not by hiding, but by blooming. I will remind anyone who feels unseen that they are not hidden, they are rising. If you know a mother or grandmother who is suffering in silence, do not wait. Find help. Listen. Believe them. Because they deserve a voice, they deserve protection, and they deserve to bloom, no matter what dark soil they have endured. Psalm 46:5 reads, "God is within her, she will not fall." I believe that. I am that woman, and we all deserve the chance to rise again. If this story touched you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, reach out, speak up, and help them find their way home. For every quiet voice bowed by fear, there is a strength waiting to be heard. Thank you for listening to my story. If it stirred something in your heart, if you've ever sat at a table where your voice was drowned out, or lived in a home where your footsteps felt like trespassing, I want you to know you are not alone, and it is never too late to speak. They tried to silence me with fear, but fear didn't last. My memory did, my truth did, and now maybe it can help someone else find theirs. So if you know a grandmother whose voice has been buried, help her dig it up. If you are that grandmother, remember this: quiet doesn't mean powerless, it just means we've been watching, waiting, and when we finally speak, the world listens. This has been Grandma, True Stories, where silence ends and truth begins. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories of quiet strength, justice without shouting, and the kind of revenge only memory can deliver. I'm still here, I'm still remembering, and I've still got stories to tell.